Hello, I'm Eagle Gardens 1 on Instagram, and this is fucking talking shit with Eagle, episode 646. Hopefully, you guys have had a great evening this evening. I've had a pretty good day myself. I've got a great guest for you this evening, a trooper, even though he's had some problems this evening, still hanging out with us tonight. You'll find him on Instagram as maizeandgrew. Doug, how you doing this evening?
Oh, excellent. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being on. It's a good rainy spring night. You know, that brings forth the flowers the next day. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Well, thank you for hanging out with us tonight. Appreciate your time. How you want to tell everybody where they can find you? Even though I kind of let on a little bit, you want to tell them where they can find you?
Yes, no problem. Easiest way to find me is at maizeandgrew on Instagram. You can feel free to direct message or comment or anything that you guys like. I'm pretty active on there lately, and I've been trying to do a few other different things in the community. So any interaction like that always helps. Feel free to message anytime.
Right out. Well, we'll get to the events here hopefully sometime soon. But first and foremost, we like to start it off right from the beginning. When and where, how cannabis came into our lives. If you don't mind sharing, when did cannabis come into your life? Either you've seen it or the first time you consumed.
Oh, well, I have a particularly symbiotic story for this. I was lucky enough to get out of college or get out of high school. I went to college. I went to Western Michigan, spent a couple of years out there. I'm a former teacher. Unfortunately, a lot of schools close pretty prematurely. So I got into cannabis shortly thereafter. But my first exposure to cannabis personally was in college. But I actually got the idea to start growing, oh, I'd say right after I graduated. I was lucky enough to live in an area where I was able to just have a little garden. And luckily for me, there was a Catholic church down the road, and we had a lot of older women who would walk down the road there and go to church. Well, eventually, as the sun got to the driveway, I would put my basil plants out in front of the driveway. And this was just in the suburbs, you know. And these old ladies would come by, and eventually they started asking me, you know, if they could buy the basil from me so they could make their pesto. Well, it occurred to me that, you know, it wasn't just for feeding my rabbits anymore, but it was a chance to maybe cash in on this crop. Well, luckily for me, I had a cousin who was already involved. I got started with him, and then I was lucky enough to get my first kind of exposure to the community by working at one of the first dispensaries in Detroit. And then from there, I went on to Colorado. I came back to Michigan, and that brings me to where we are today. My first consumption, though, was actually with a good friend from high school. And it took a couple of times before it actually got to me. But I remember correctly, it was Christmas Eve of 2003. So I've been at this for almost 20 years now.
That doesn't seem too long ago there. So what made you try cannabis for the first time?
So for me, it was personal expansion, you know, just trying to see what it was all about. Luckily for me, I had some caring friends that took good care of me, and I saw that it was a safer alternative to alcohol. I was lucky enough to not really have alcohol in my life at all,
Are you
so I didn't.
there?
Yes, I'm here. Oh man.
A little bit of a delay.
Oh, okay. I think we might have it now.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry, it just seems to be cutting out there. Luckily for me, I had friends that took good care of me, and I got involved with it with my cousin. And before I knew it, cannabis kind of became a currency in college. There were trades that you can make. You met new people. It was kind of a nice little side hustle for some people. So I decided to adopt it pretty wholeheartedly at that point, and I really never have looked back since then. So for me, it's been introduced into my life through friends, family, and then personal curiosity.
So, do you remember what it was that you consumed for the first time? What strains were available to you?
Yes, I actually remember it was called they called it Christmas trees, if I remember correctly. Obviously, because of the connotation with a decorated Christmas tree. But I remember very specifically asking my friends how a joint worked. I just couldn't grasp the concept that you inhaled the joint
Hello?
through the actual joint. Oh, hey, are you guys there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Boy, I'm telling you, I'm
There's a little
struggling
bit
real
of a
quick.
delay tonight for some reason.
Oh, yeah, it is raining pretty bad out by where I'm at. I don't know if that affects it.
So far, so good.
Okay, good.
But I didn't mean to interrupt. Please
Yeah.
continue.
Oh, yeah. I just remember very specifically not understanding how a joint worked, and one of my friends had to explain it to me. And after a couple of rounds with it, I had my first taste of what they called Christmas trees. And I remember after that, I think I ate close to a whole box, if not maybe a little bit more cereal. And I knew after that point that that was something that was meant for me. And then before I knew it, I discovered a green thumb that I got from my grandmother, and it just really all kind of came together as a grower, as a consumer, and as essentially a guide for some people. A lot of people in my family have not had any experience with cannabis and now need it for medical reasons, and I'm lucky enough to be able to be that person for friends and family, and I take that very seriously. And I apply the teaching mechanisms that I learned when I was a teacher to explaining cannabis to people for the political, recreational, or spiritual aspects of it. And those were really the main focuses for me. Always focusing on the cultivation really is where I found my calling in life. When I have a happy garden, I'm a happy person. It's really quite reflective of your general mindset. If you have a good garden and you're doing well, you seem to be doing better in life. If your garden is not doing so well, you seem to maybe not be doing so well in life. And I find that there's a there's a direct connotation between the garden and your spiritual well-being. And when I got into the role of being able to be a grower, uh, you know, personally and then commercially and then back to personally, that's when I really felt the true power of the community. Not only did it embrace me, but it also employed me. It housed me. It fed me. It, socialized me. It became a part of your identity almost.
I have to agree 100% on all your views so far. I do believe this is a very spiritual plant and experience. Uh, I've kind of related it lately to like basically spirit plant medicine. I've kind of
Yep.
listened to a few books lately, kind of geared in that direction. And basically, when they talk about that, they kind of talk about, being mindful and wandering through the forest and kind of letting the herbs or plants kind of speak to you as a medicine. you've kind of made that symbiotic relationship with each other. And I think you have that relationship with cannabis. I think as we used to be able to nose those jars. I think that in particular strain, terp profile connects with you, and you've made that same thing, that spiritual kind of connection with it, kind of agreeing with each other that, this is your medicine.
Yes, and it goes both ways too. Cultivation wise as well. I've seen 2 pound plus a light gardens, commercial gardens crash to 0.8 pounds a light commercial gardens because they had some sort of infighting or there was some sort of discrepancy in the management or the ownership. And it only takes a couple of weeks before things can really take a nosedive. But conversely, when things are going well or things are steady or even improving, you can really make that connection as well. So for me, I started off with sativas. I was the sativa guy for a long time just because I had access to the genetics that allowed me to do that. But as I've gotten more into the indica side of things and I've seen more of what the rosin type of thing will do for people, it's definitely changed my opinion. I used to be like, all sativas all the time. I don't know why anyone would want anything different. But now I'm seeing a lot of people benefit from very specifically heavy hasher type strains. And I used to teach health and government. I know that's kind of unbelievable. It's literally the perfect intersection for medical marijuana, but it's really true. I've seen people who have benefited equally from sativas and people have benefited equally from indicas, but the elasticity and the malleability of indicas just really seems to be more medically conducive to what patients are needing. I recently medicated a whole bunch of my honey from one of my hives with some single source rosin, and it's basically one of the only things that my patient can take to relieve them from their opioid, I don't want to call it an addiction, but their opioid use. And they're trying to manage more symptoms with cannabis than they are with opioids. And I think there's also a powerful antagonistic effect with cannabis too, where it can push out bad things, alcohol or opioids especially. I certainly know people who have changed over completely from alcohol to cannabis, and I can't think of one person who hasn't found some sort of spiritual peace. So I can't see how you can't call it spiritual if it's antagonistically spiritual or if it's symbiotically spiritual. Either way, it's attaching to the individual, and that's kind of where being a caregiver gives you kind of a role like a shaman. You got to ask people what they need and deliver that consistently and affordably. And to be able to be a part of someone's life in that way, to be in their home, be consumed by their body. If you're not putting spiritual effort and passion into that, what are you doing, right?
Right on. We see eye to eye on a lot of things already. I'm very much enjoying this conversation so far. One of my big standpoints is I believe cannabis can be a very good weapon towards addiction. I've lost a lot of people in my life to pharmaceutical drugs, and I find it to be very heartbreaking. And I've talked a lot about lately using cannabis as a rehab tool for a lot of the same things you're talking about: pharmaceutical rehab, alcohol rehab, even further than that, just rehabilitation in all forms. So I'm stoked to hear what you're saying here, because I think it's huge. It has a healing power, not only as the medicine part of things, but I think, as you're kind of alluding to here, the cultivation side of things has a huge hand in the rehabilitation as well. So hats off to you, my friend, for fighting this fight. I'm stoked to hear more of your story.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's very kind. I'm lucky enough, I'm single, never been married, don't have kids. So I've been able to commit my life to this. And I've had the support, and luckily I've just met the right people at the right times, from, old partners or new partners to political figures or authors, musicians, things of that nature. And it's always emboldened my path. I've been led by great people. And I've been lucky enough to be a part of the battle where I didn't have to wage any real wars, right? The culture was starting to turn. And now it's our responsibility to, have fun with it and have some lightness to it. But there really needs to be I hate to use the word pharmaceutical, but there needs to be pharmaceutical grade cannabis available to people that don't have to worry about the multi-million-dollar corporations and all the extra stuff they're putting on their cannabis and the way they're kind of working through tests and stuff like that. It's just a good, honest way to connect with somebody and not be invasive on their life, but still help their symptoms, still manage their life, or maybe it is just spiritual or it's just recreational for people. But either way, there's joy being brought from it, and to be able to be a part of that, and to create that, short of being a breeder, a cultivator's, I'd say, the next most important person. So when you get that kind of responsibility and you have the chance to replicate those results commercially or privately in a larger sense, it really can direct all your focus, right? I've heard it said a lot of times that you can either have a garden or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever. And it's just, it's kind of true, because they do become your children, they become your babies. And, you don't want to go on vacation. You don't want to leave them. You worry about them. You hire people to watch them. It's unique how, I'll say, like, a dog will come into your life when you most need it. I think cannabis did that for me. And I want to keep rewarding myself and rewarding the plant, and just kind of perpetuate this culture of not necessarily always just hippy dippy shit, right? Like, I like that there's people out there in Israel doing crazy research, or there's people in Ann Arbor doing crazy research. There's higher standards being required of people. But I feel like in 10 years, we're going to be having a different conversation. And I'm hoping that it's not, where do I find medicinally valuable cannabis, not just the cheapest grocery store cannabis I can find. And that's where the political science side of me comes in, and is really, really out there for that educate. I used to call it education, because we had a lot of older folks that would come into the dispensary that I worked at way back when, and they just had no idea what they were doing, And I went out to Colorado, and I had some bud tending experience out there. I would just do it on the weekends or at night for an extra few bucks, and people would go to the hospital because they ate too many edibles, and then we don't want that either, So having the ability to not only cultivate but educate about the effects of what I'm creating. I mean, I can't think of really any other person other than a chef that might have that, or an engineer. And I ain't no chef, and I certainly ain't no engineer, but to be able to predictably and accurately and consistently provide consumable or otherwise product for somebody, and then to tie that in with this new homes. I have a big thing for homesteading. I really like that kind of lifestyle. And, before, I don't think that would have happened had I not got into cannabis, right? So there's cannabis feeding my spiritual side again. And it's impossible to ignore that. And I find that more often than not, even people who are just being silly with it find a story or two about their experiences that are serious. And I just can't, you can't dismiss this plant for multiple reasons. But now that we see that the majority of the United States is in favor of this by quite a bit, I'm just interested to see what happens in the next 10 years. Because I've worked commercially. I've been a consultant in multiple different states. I've been to New Mexico. I've been to Ohio. I've been to Florida. I've been to Pennsylvania, Florida, Michigan, and Colorado. And I mean, boy, I'll tell you, some states got it right. Oklahoma had it right in terms of licensing, but they don't have good water down there, right? And then you see all the political and monetary jockeying for power that goes on with this plant. I'm very concerned about the future. I want to make sure that If this has to go back underground, we still have access to it, because I'm telling you, the commercial side of things aren't looking good right now.
So I guess how do you define the line between, and this is a hard subject that's near and dear to my heart. So, and I fight this fight every time I have this conversation. So where do you draw the line? Usually I'm on your side of the table when I have this conversation. So maybe you can help me get some ammo the next time around. So where do you draw the line here? Because I kind of feel like, man, cannabis does, have that healing power across the board, recreational, medical, yes. But I think once we kind of get back to where you're walking around in your medicine, and we'll just throw, the cookie example. Once your medicine, you're wearing around a cookie t-shirt, I think we're back to, the pharmaceutical, the pushing of the pharmaceutical medicine, where they're basically giving you stickers and pens, and you're seeing it on TV in the commercials. To ask your doctor for cookies. You know what I mean? So where and how do we draw that line, I guess?
So for me, it's simple. There's one question. So when you tell anyone that you're in the cannabis industry, they always want to take you out to lunch the next day. And I've had probably 30 of these lunches, right? And that's how you generate business. That's how you start, get involved with startups. And there's a lot of value to it. But I found that where the divergence most commonly happens is if the person that I'm consulting with asks me this one question: how much money can I make, or how much money does it cost to create a plant? And I don't know why, but every time that happens with me, it turns me off to a very large degree. Like, I've walked away from quite a few people because they don't have the right mindset for it. And it's difficult to explain to people that it's a crop just like anything else. It's just as predictable as farming. There are certain things we can do to ensure that we have better outcomes, but the reality is if you're in this to pinch pennies, it's going to show in the end product. And I mean, I've worked for places for years, and then all of a sudden they change their mind and they want to do things the cheap way. So for me, it's really when the question stops becoming what's the right thing to do, and then it becomes what's the cheap thing to do. Now, I understand, I've run a business before. I know that you can't just spend all the money in the world and expect it to work, but the types of things that they do to cut corners are typically unethical, and they've robbed the plant of its healing or symptom management properties. And that could be as simple as distillation, or it could be ozone, or it could be microwaving cannabis. Like, there's a falseness, there's an inauthenticity to the commercial side of things. And I think that the authentic question needs to be, how can we create the best cannabis? And when you start getting into how can I make it cheaper, or how can I make the cheapest cannabis, that's a completely different game. I always tell people, you either need to grow the best or you need to grow the most. I certainly don't want to do all the work that is required to grow the most. It's a lot easier to sell, or it's a lot easier to get donations for high quality cannabis at a reasonable price than it is to try and push low quality cannabis for your, whatever you got to get to pay rent. And it becomes sad, and it kind of becomes perverse. And that's I mean, I hate to say it, but there's more often than not, it comes down to that question: is how can we do it cheaper?
Which is a good thing, I guess. In business, you have to do it cheaper.
Yeah.
But does it always? So what is your answer? I mean, most times I think most people would automatically assume, well, organics is your answer. So is that the answer you give, or what is your answer?
So for me, what it almost always ends up being is I explain to people, like, I bring my product. This is hand watered, and it's not even all organic. I do a soup organic. So almost everything I'd say 60% of what I use is organic, but there's 40%. I use pH up and down. That's not organic. I mean, that's about as far from organic as you can get. But I don't present myself as being a strictly organic person. But the way that it almost always works out is they want to end up doing salts and cocoa. So, I mean, that's kind of like the commercial balance. If you don't want to do, TLO or no-tills or, natural outdoor native soil stuff, they'll settle for, your flood drain table or your line irrigation, ones to fives kind of thing, something that's simple. But the people who are committed to quality almost always have an idea of how they want to do it. So that does remove a lot of the issue for me, but it almost always ends up being similar to TLO, True Living Organics. So, or a no-till is another popular thing. I'm seeing a lot. My buddy works out in Colorado, and he's setting up a whole, I think 25% of his canopy space is going to be a no-till space now, because that's the only way you can make money out there. But he's also in the high desert, so I don't think he has as much access to good water. I mean, there's a lot of other little factors there. But I think for me, the safest medium that's going to create the commercial availability that we need for people, but still keep somewhat of the authenticity, is going to be that super organic type, salt 5-gallon bucket runs, just for labor and all that stuff. It just ends up being what almost everybody picks.
I have no qualms with salts myself. I know I'm just getting back into the organic side of cannabis within the last 2 years. I started there, but it's been back and forth. But majority of my cannabis growing career has been in cocoa and salts. So I have no problems with it, cannabis being grown that way. And with these new 2-parts, the floor flex and stuff like that, man, it can't get much cheaper than pennies on the dollar, to be honest with you. Even though organics can be quite cheap, I see your point more on a commercial scale there. I'm with you a little bit here.
Yeah, once you cross that 500 plant mark, people, I'm consulting for a 10,000 plant up in Northeast Michigan right now. Not, it's a long drive and all this stuff, but they're good guys, but they don't have a concept of what the difference between indoor and outdoor growing is. So I think that's another big factor. But what I am noticing that a lot of commercial gardens are doing is that they're just doing whatever they can do on the indoor, and then they're all just banging out outdoors. Like every outdoor garden I see is at least 1,000, if not 5 or 10,000 plants. So I think people are just kind of getting by in the winter months with the indoor, and then just doubling down on the outdoor. And that's a skill, man. Like I've grown outdoors for 10 years, and luckily the only year I haven't had an outdoor grow since I started growing was last year. And it was just because I was moving. It's just my girl left me, all that stuff. It was just a country song, so I didn't have an outdoor garden. But out of the 12 years, I guess that was the right year to pick, because it was one of the worst for growing. But these outdoor commercial grows, what they do is they'll go and they'll just do a straight extract run, like just straight harvest it off the vine. They'll put it right into this little machine bucket for you. I mean, it's about as commercial as it gets. And I think they make almost all their operating revenue out of that, because some of these greenhouses have 2,500 to 5,000 plants in them, and we're talking 1-gallon pots stacked to the roof. It's really quite something to see. So I think the craft game on the indoor is kind of secondary, but I've seen places triple down on their business because they had a good outdoor, and I've seen places lose almost all their business because they've had a bad outdoor. So it's funny because everyone thinks the money's indoor, but really it's actually outdoor, just for the scalability factor.
But then are they losing the Zen factor, the spiritual side of the cannabis, which I believe that is the craft side of cannabis. When when I really believe that when you talk about craft, there's definitely some spirituality in there. There's a lot more one-on-one. You know what I mean? I don't really think you can get a craft cannabis much more over a 300 plant. I think it has to be, you know, more one-on-one person. Once it gets to where you're automatically watered and not being as personal, I think that you jeopardizing some taste there, some quality for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like I always see people, they're always calculating like KPIs for their workers and stuff like that. And it's just, it really is, it's too scientific, if that makes sense. So I've gotten lucky and
I believe we might have lost him. He is driving. Hopefully he'll call back. So come back on camera. There we go. Hopefully he'll come back in. He is driving. Actually, reason for no video tonight is being a trooper. He just actually a half hour before the show, I received a phone call that his grandma had passed, and he is actually on his way there. So hats off to him for still making this work regardless, but hopefully he'll kind of come back in and finish up this episode. If not, then I'm always up for a redo, that's for sure. My condolences to him and his family. So either way, hopefully he comes back. Dave in St. Louis, cheers to you. How you doing? We nerd DWC, cheers, crack babies, hillbilly herbs, how you doing? Who else we got? Soulborn Addiction, cheers to you. The American one, Smiley and Chat, of course. Let's Be Buds, Uncle Rick, cheers to you. Who else we got? Chat Blind Cat 420, Blue Kiss Gardens, how you guys doing? Drewzilla, Red Pill, cheers to you. 710 Connoisseur, Martial Artist, big ups. Dog Pounds. Who else we got? Jason Istone, Matt Ness. How you guys doing? What are you guys smoking on? Igor, how you doing, my friend? Nice to see you in chat. What's up, Nick? Cheers. Hopefully he comes back. We'll hang out for a few. See if he's able to get his phone. Maybe it died. Maybe it didn't. Either way, like I told him I'm willing to redo this at any point. Yeah, I really think he was a hell of a guy for doing this while he's traveling anyhow. So doors open. The door's open, maizeandgrew. James C. Weaver, how you doing? Mr. Green Fingers, there we go. He's back.
hey, sorry, Bill. I think I might have lost you for a second. Yeah, might have lost you there for a second, but yeah, you're right. That 300 mark. I mean, if you got to trim it all, boy, I feel bad for anybody who has to do that. So, I could see one person being able to handle a Class AA license. I think that's 300. Pretty, that'd be a real full-time job, but it's definitely possible if you have, I'd say, if you have the trimming help and maybe an extra hand on just transplant or staking days. But sometimes they just put them out in the field and they get what they get, and that's a pretty common practice too. I think people rush, and then they put out improperly tall or weak or rubbery plants that they can't handle it, and then they kind of just deal with what comes. And I think I've seen a lot of flower only grows turn into extract only grows for that reason.
Yeah, I agree. It's sad. I don't know. It seems like the outdoor market really does push the extract market a little hard, to be honest with you. I heard just today, a gram of anything dabbable in Oklahoma, $3 a gram.
Yeah.
$3 a gram for, that's crazy in my opinion. I mean,
Oh,
in my mind, you better be doing 1,000 plants at minimum or have a nice outside grow. Otherwise, it isn't even worth the time.
yeah, you're absolutely right on that. And that was the experience I had when I was down in Oklahoma. I went down about, I'd say about, gosh, was it 2 years ago? Might have been 2 years ago. Yeah, it was 2 years ago. And the guy I met, I mean, he was a well-funded ex-basketball player, had all sorts of money, but he didn't. You either find people who have one of the three following things: the time, the money, or the desire, right? And this guy had the money and the time. I just don't think he had the desire. Well, with him is the race was so strong that it shot warehouse prices through the roof. I mean, we're talking 14, 15, $20 a square foot for some of these places, right? And in Oklahoma, I don't know if you've been down there lately, but their water is awful. So it doesn't surprise me that it's $3 a gram down there. I actually consulted for a place, and I had to explain to them that they're too far behind to start a 10,000 plant outdoor grow from seed, right? Like they just had a natural open outdoor design. And I think it's just gotten to the point where the only people that can rush to fill these vacancies are people who don't have the desire, but have either the money or the time or know someone who does. So it was kind of a way. I'm kind of a little salty about it, if I tell you the truth, because when I left, there was a malfunction on my timer and there was a malfunction on my RO system. And I'll admit, I just forgot to put one of the filters back in. And I ended up frying some plants pretty bad. I ended up having to toss a couple of them to go down there to sit with this guy for 3 or 4 hours every day for a week for him to try and find a place to start this grow. And by the time he finally got it going, he changed his mind 2 more times. And at that point, I didn't think he was serious. So him and I decided to go separate ways, in an amicable way. But he is still struggling to find space. And I keep trying to tell him, I'm like, man, I heard Oklahoma's like, the lowest of the lows right now, but he's still insistent on trying to get in there. And $3 a gram for a dab, boy, that's crazy. The way I see it is, you're going to give the extractor a third. All right, so there's $1. Then you're telling me you're growing quality cannabis for $2 a gram and getting it processed for the extractor. I don't know. And the tall tale sign for me is, do you consume your own product? I mean, I was at Hash Bash this year. I was actually selling mouthpieces, those silicone mouthpieces. They used to be called Mouthpiece, PEACE, but now they're called Moose Labs or something. Because I mean, people were selling $3 and $2 grams and mushrooms too for $3, $4, or $5 a gram. And I was just like, man, I don't know if I'd even want to compete with that. I ended up selling about 40 of those mouthpieces though, which was nice, so I got rid of those from an old show that I had. But yeah, it's starting to happen in Michigan too. I mean, I've seen high quality dabs or flowers. I will admit, I'm much more of a flower guy. I'm not into the dabs too much. They're just too much for me. But there's really good high quality stuff going around. And I mean, I'm seeing people break years long friendships over it, because they're getting, California outdoor that looks just as good for, $50 an ounce. And I mean, I've seen a lot of people not work with each other anymore because of stuff like that. And now just this last couple of weeks, I've been seeing prices go back up and people are kind of looking more for that quality, which is good. But now I'm wondering how many of us, and I use the term us colloquially, I can't say that word. But the idea is how many people quit, right? How many good quality growers just quit or went commercial and now are doing, whatever the commercial says. And now it's going to be like, all right, so now we don't have enough of the good cannabis for the intended original purpose. And I mean, boy, that chaps my ass a little bit.
Yeah, the way cannabis is handled in Michigan really chaps my ass, to be honest with you. Again, because I lean 100% towards the medical side. I appreciate, and as a kid and always growing up, I dreamed of recreational cannabis. You know what I mean? But as you know, somebody that's got a foot in the fight or a foot in the race here, uh, I don't like the way it's being handled, to be honest with you. I think the whole thing's being fault. The whole medical side of cannabis is just, it opened the door for us initially, and then I think big business kind of is just slam the door open and steamrolling over us like it's a fucking a Black Friday sale, basically. Uh, I, I, like I said, I think that a lot of the medical side of things is the cultivation side of things, and then moreover, I think, I mean, just look at the way it is now for a recreational grower here in Michigan. Any household can have 12 plants. Whatever they can produce in this, in with those 12 plants, they're legally able to keep and consume and walk around with 2.5 ounces. But the second they call that medicine, well, damn it, some people should be called in. You know what I mean? You're in the wrong for having more than 2.5, even though that could be, you know, your full spectrum oil or edibles or whatever. You know, you may just need a high rate of, you know, cannabis for your consumption. And I think that's, then they turn around and point fingers at the caregivers for the overages, the black market.
Yeah. Well, I can assure you that you're on the right path with that. I've gone up to Lansing a couple of times. I've sat in on some meetings. I've actually got a chance to speak a couple of times. Now, albeit they gave us 1/10 of the time, but we did have an opportunity to speak. And I've been doing this. You know, political science is my minor. I'm interested in that naturally. So you add cannabis into it, and I'm involved in cannabis. Like all of a sudden, I'm at those meetings trying to educate these folks. And I mean, I sat right next to Steve Lingler or whatever his name is, him and his wife. Like I had a stinking hippie just went and sat down right next to him. And I was polite and I was pleasant and we talked. And the woman was actually very nice. I have to give her that. But their concept of cannabis is just so perverted and it's so skewed. Like I had to explain to them that just because you have 72 plants doesn't mean that you're going to have 72 plants flowering. And even if you do, you're still going to have to wait another 6 months to get the other ones back or 3 months to get them back. And they you know, I asked them, you know, simply like, how much cannabis do you think a person with a 20-foot area, let's say a medium-sized closet can produce? And, you know, some of them will say 10 pounds. And it's just like, boy, I'll tell you, I'd like to hire that guy, you know, but the general understanding of where cannabis is and what it can do is it's so askew. It's unbelievable. Like I said, education, right? That's my whole goal is to educate people about this stuff. And the people making the decision neither have the time nor the desire to learn what they need to know. And they don't understand that their apathy essentially is someone else's tragedy. And when we don't recognize that, you're making decisions that will impact people's livelihoods, people's lives, people's medical needs or lack thereof, I don't really think you should be the person making that decision anymore. Because you're, you know, in a democracy, you're supposed to make decisions for the people you represent. And I just don't see that being represented in Lansing. And it's heartbreaking because it does allow for people like, you know, these MCMA type people to come in. And you know what? I got to give it to them. They had a great presentation. You know, I'm a teacher. I watched what they said. I learned what they were trying to say, and they were effective in the way that they communicated things. Now, I will say it was a good thing that there were people there to correct some of the large misconceptions that they were trying to push across. But short of that, I mean, they kind of did a good job. So it's very, very difficult to see anything but the presentation in front of you, right? And I understand these lawmakers got lives. They can't just be reading everything all the time. But when people call your phone nonstop, when you have thousands of emails about things that affect people's occupation, their medical status, their, you know, how good they feel in the afternoon, you know, when their knees hurt or their, you know, their eyes are sore from glaucoma or whatever it might be. And if you're not willing to take the time to understand the minimal inputs that create this thing that you're making a decision on, I just wonder why you're making the decision. And I can tell you personally, I've been doing this for years going up to Lansing, and it's getting worse. It's getting way worse. Whereas it used to be, here's my grandson, he has epilepsy, look at how wonderful he's doing. Now it's, look at these caregivers, they're putting out toxic cannabis. And then 2 weeks later, they have the largest commercial recall of all time. And it's there's no authenticity. Everything is fake, it's perverse, and it's kind of frustrating if I had to say. Luckily, we had enough people show up to where the number of people maybe emphasize more than what any one particular person will say. And this is an unpopular opinion, but we got to start coming a lot better. We can't be showing up at these events and these legislative hearings and getting on the mic and sounding like a bunch of idiots. Like, we have to be concise. We have to be sharp. We have to be on point. We have to say things that haven't been said 15 times before. And I'll blame us for that. Like, there's been a couple of times, Hash Bash was an embarrassment. Like, I was up the Lansing rally. I think it was in like maybe March. And the guy that was on the microphone, every other word was a cuss word. Like, I just did not look good for us. And all these guys got to do is sit there and film for 10 seconds and they have their argument. So that's one thing I'm going to say to anybody in the community that's listening right now. Like, let's show up, let's dress up, let's talk, you know, politely and correctly and concisely, because it only takes 10 seconds of video for them to have their argument. We need to show 10 years of passion, 10 years of business connections, 10 years of community to even be considered in this conversation.
I definitely like where you're going with that 100%. You know, as far as that whole thing goes, man, I've been very disheartened to see where the Hash Bash has even gone. I mean, realistically, you say the Hash Bash nowadays and people don't even connect the event to push the initial 50-year event to push for cannabis legalization. They don't even realize that. They think about that cup that's afterwards. That's the Hash Bash now. That, can you believe that, how sad that is? As an advocate, that breaks my heart, to be honest with you. And then, as you said, I've been there in past years as well. Even the speakers, like you're saying, aren't even speaking with as much passion as they used to. The fight's not over by any means. And yeah, I agree 100%. Thank you for making light of it.
Well, and you know, I've I'd love to hear myself talk type of thing. So I always think to myself, like, man, we really could do better. I mean, let's write a letter. If we got to write a letter, let's write a letter. That works fine too. The two best things you can do is call and then immediately follow up with an email. Just call once a day. Like I always say in my post, polite, concise, and daily. That's the only thing that matters to these people. And I will tell you, on a positive side, when this does work, you call up these places and they'll be like, oh my God, you're the millionth person today to call. And then you know that things are being effective. And I've had a couple of legislators tell me like, hey, I'm not going to mess with these cannabis people anymore because my phone never stopped ringing. And, you know, of course, we don't want to drown out other needs in the community, but we also can be concise, proactive, and polite and really impress people. You know, the lady up by the gas station, my parents got a cabin up north. She can't stand that I'm a cannabis user. Like I come in and I buy papers and she's just disgusted. But she always says the same thing to me. She says, well, you're polite, you know, and I'm single, never been married, don't have kids. And I'm polite and I'm on my own. And I help her out and I love her business. I always come up there. And now we're at the point where, you know, she tolerates me. She actually asks me how business is going because she sees that there's another side to it, not just the corporate grab or the corporate, we're sick, but we're not really sick, but we want the exposure that we're sick kind of thing. And she really has turned a corner over. I took her about 5 years, I'd say, of me going up there and talking with her and, you know, her asking questions. And, you know, it's a beautiful thing because she actually started asking me questions a couple of years ago. And since then, her whole mentality has changed. But it's difficult for me to sit here and go, I had a person who was vehemently against this now asking questions when I have people in front of me who don't know anything about it making decisions that affect other people's lives. And again, it's just, I mean, I hate to say it, but I'll tell you the truth. I voted against legalization, and I do it again. Like, there's days where I wish this was illegal again. I know that sounds crazy, but the standards are that poor commercially, and people don't understand because they haven't spent enough time in a commercial grow, right? I always act as a consultant, and I always get to see kind of the day-to-day things, and they just don't realize how different it is. So it's a shortcoming on our part for not educating that, but it's also I think there's not the priority push to it anymore because either they know that the market's saturated or they simply don't care. And I like to think that it's more the market.
Brought up another good point, and that's when recreational came through, how many medical grows threw in the towel because it was easier just to get their cannabis through the recreational side of things.
Right.
Quite a few.
Yeah. And people don't realize how much they shortchange themselves for that. I mean, like, here's the thing, man. I'm a homesteader, right? I raise chickens, rabbits, bees. I got a dog, a cat. I do, plants, edible mushrooms, like all that stuff. And I'm really into that. And it's just, I know that a farm fresh chicken egg is worth 50 cents, right? But I don't try and charge $3 for it, right? Because I'd rather give a higher quality product directly to the consumer. And I mean, you can apply that to honey, to starter plants, to cannabis plants. There's a direct desire to not compensate quality, and it's starting to change. I'm starting to see where more people are requesting quality, so that's good. But boy, I tell you, when I had my grow, up north for a while, I'd say there was probably 10 or 12 of us up there, just kind of in that small little community. I don't think there's but 3 of them left, and I'm not a part of that anymore because the electricity is just way too much up there. But they're all about outdoor up there, and they have some really badass outdoors. But yeah, it's I'd say, man, I bet you 60% of that market disappeared. And it's funny because the demand went up exponentially, and the only people that were able to compensate for that were the commercial grows. So in a sense, our loss was their win, and that always had a bad taste in my mouth too.
And some of that I wonder too. I think that a lot of cross line packs came through to make that bail out. Be honest with you, I don't think that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very accurate. Very, very accurate. It got difficult for a while there. I think things are starting to shape up a little bit, but I'm looking at people throwing events, just trying to survive. People just trying to eat, man. And it's my goal with cannabis was to educate people to a point where I hoped that cannabis could do half of what the auto industry did for our parents, right? Like, our parents arguably had the greatest period of time to be successful. And if cannabis had an opportunity to do half of that for us, we'd be in a good spot. And I really believe, I thought it would become close to matching, but unfortunately it just hasn't shaken out that way. And that part really broke my heart when I kind of realized, like, all right, cannabis didn't save Flint. It didn't save Detroit. It helped, but everything got earmarked, or it got muddied or diluted somehow. And it really broke my heart. And I'm not necessarily like big on social equity and everything either. Like, I want everyone to just grow their own. That's what I want. Like, I know it sounds self-defeating, but I would really rather just everybody grow their own. But, I think it's going to be a while till even landlords come around to that. I was lucky enough to find 3 landlords in a row that for the extra couple of bucks a month, we're happy to let you grow. But I also like to live in the country, and that helps a lot too. So it's an interesting thing because really it's The answer is everybody just grow your own.
I agree with that 100%. How come they knew in the 70s the power of the horticulture,
Yep.
the more spiritual side of things and the rehabilitation side of it. How come that isn't taught in schools? As a teacher, I feel like that's a good question for you. How come, that side of things, more they teach, what is it? Can't think of it right now. Home ec,
Yep.
cooking, that type of things. But why don't they necessarily teach you more how to, garden, cultivate, plants, vegetables, stuff like that? I've learned more about myself, more stuff scientifically, more stuff spiritually through the cultivation of cannabis than I picked up a lot in school, to be honest with you. Through the journey of organics, every door I open up with organics gets me deeper spiritually and understands my body more with every door I open up. So how come they don't teach something more like that, in high school than some of the bullshit that they do teach?
So I will tell you, it is still alive in a few places. Macomb Community College, perfect example, has a beekeeping course. I just happened to grow up in Sterling Heights, so Macomb Community College. I think I had two of them actually in town. So it is still out there, but I'm going to tell you the truth, man, and this is going to suck. The reason they don't teach that is because it's not economical for colleges to teach people how to teach that. And let that blow your mind for a minute. We don't teach what people need to know. We teach what we can pay, we can charge people to learn to teach.
Yeah.
Sad, but true.
Yeah.
Everyone will pay $50,000 a year for their son or daughter to be an engineer. No one will pay $50,000 a year for their son to be I hate to say soybean. That's the first thing that came to my mind. A soybean farmer, or an English teacher for that matter, right? Like they're hell, I was a health teacher for Christ's sake. People are willing to pay for that. People aren't willing to pay for, people to grow a plant, right? It's I suffer MSU. I'll give MSU, and then I suppose Northern has some things. They're kind of starting to get into it, but those are colleges, And I'd also say that a lot of schools are positioned in areas where there's not a lot of arable land, and that's probably another reason why. I was lucky enough to work at the Boys and Girls Club in Kalamazoo almost my entire time in college. It's one of my favorite jobs. It's very difficult, but there was a school. It was called Lake Street. It's called the Lake Street Elementary School, or Lake Elementary School. Anyways, it's on the southeast side of Kalamazoo, not the best area. But I will tell you, that school had a corner lot. I'd say it was probably, oh boy, I bet you that was a 3 to, maybe it might even been a 5 acre lot if you included the 2 parking lots. But they had a beautiful, stunning greenhouse, absolutely stunning greenhouse. And I was lucky enough I was what was called the health and life skills coordinator. So I taught people how to, cook food and raise their kids, and, don't shake your baby, and, just healthy stuff, how to utilize exercise equipment, that kind of stuff. But we were privileged enough because we got to a point where there was a desire for a community garden. And I got lucky. I was the one who got to do that. And I'm talking, I think we pulled 3,000 pounds worth of vegetables out of that place in the first year. Like, just absolutely just fantastic. But I'll tell you what happened the next year. The garden didn't get the funding that it needed, so it kind of went under. And then the kids started playing kickball in there, and it was all over after that. But the only real place I can think of, and I've taught in Grand Rapids, I've taught in Flint, I've taught in Detroit, taught in East Point. The only place that I can think of that has ever had anything even similar to a horticulture or a 4-H was I taught in Mattawan, Michigan, which is just west of Kalamazoo. I taught there for about 6 months as my pre-internship, and they had a 4-H program. So that one was covered. And then the Lake Street Elementary School had a greenhouse, but that was it.
It's a little sad. I think as far as high school goes, I'm hoping I had some kids that went to Duran for a minute there, and they taught a little bit of agriculture there. They actually that was kind of funny living out that way because they actually planned their like vacation days and stuff around like harvest days and shit like that, hunting. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Not as a lot of
Yeah.
school districts plan around that type of stuff anymore.
Well, I'll tell you, up in the UP, they actually there was some sort of allowance made. I'm not sure what it was, and don't quote me on this, but there's such a high percentage of hunters at the school, and the kids live so far from the school. I think they either allowed them to bring their hunting rifle to school or something like that. There was some sort of compromise made. I can't remember what it was, but it was because it was such a part of their culture. I think that was up in, gosh, I want to say that was in like Brimley or something like that, way up there. I remember reading an article about that a couple of years ago. So, it's interesting because Mattawan was the same way. Almost all the teachers had either a farm or they were camp counselors was kind of the other thing people did. So that idea is still out there, but there's another thing I should mention too. I met a very, very interesting guy a couple of years ago. There's this thing. It's called the Southeast Michigan Bee Association. It's called SEMBA, and I never raised bees until recently. It was about 4 or 5 years ago. So I went to this meeting and I met this guy. Gosh, I can't remember his name. Him and his wife, they were just the nicest people you'd ever want to meet. But they run a program called Bees in the D. And this guy essentially rents out rooftop property and raises bees and teaches kids about it. So, I mean, that I know that's going around. It might even be Bees in the D. I think that's their handle or I know it as a screen name, whatever you call it. But they're doing really big things. And I know that there are some schools and community gardens in Detroit that are really focusing on that, but those are what are called magnet schools, and they're not everywhere, and they're not prevalent either, I would say.
Yeah, we used to have the 4-H, and that's another thing you really don't see anything of a whole lot of in round schools anymore. That type of thing either.
Yep, I know MSU is doing their best to hang on to that. I think Central has some grants that kind of go to that. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I saw, it was a meme, I think, once that said, you might need a doctor a couple of times in your life. You might need a mechanic a couple of times in your life, but you need a farmer 3 times a day, every day in your life. And to think that the idea of being a farmer is, I don't want to use the word, but outsourced, that just blows my mind. Like I couldn't imagine my life without my farm. Like it's such a part of my life. I couldn't imagine being so far removed from it that you don't even learn about it in school. I mean, they used to teach rifle safety. They used to teach all sorts of stuff like that. I'm not trying to sound like an old fuddy-duddy here, but there's a lot to be missed of those things. Gosh, my dad was a mechanic, and I'm just barely now kind of starting to get into mechanics. And I'm 35. But I had literally a mechanic as a father with 2 garages full of tools that just it never interested me until now that I actually need to know how to use stuff so I don't have to pay to fix everything. It's just crazy, and it makes me wonder if the world were to end, would anybody be able to survive who has not had those experiences? I think there's a country song that sings that, and the tagline's like, country folks will survive, and it's kind of like the whole point is, yeah, you might have your book learning, but we know how to, I think he goes, we know how to skin a buck and drop a trout line or something like that. And I'm just wondering if that same distance is applied to farming now, or has it gone so commercial that it's really not even agriculture. It's commercial culture.
So I guess I'm curious as well about tell me a little bit about your high times experience.
Um,
What What happened? What's cool? Tell me about that.
So the High Times experience, boy, I'll tell you that they, I believe that was the largest. I think that was the largest cannabis event of all time up until that point. I think since then we've had larger ones, but I mean that, boy, you want to talk about just a breathtaking experience. If I remember correctly, there were people lined up all the way down Dorr Highway, for a mile. But that was a really unique experience because what that High Times Cannabis Cup, I think it was 2018 or maybe it was 2019. I'm losing track of the years here. That had way too many people and not enough vendors. And that is just not what's happening lately. Lately, what people have been doing is they've just been loading up as many vendors as they can and hoping for the crowds. And I think we got lucky in that sense because not only did we have good marketing and we had good, social media presence and a good product, but we just had it. We had a great crowd. And I don't think we're ever going to see that again because everybody either has their dude or has their store or has their person or has their store or does it themselves. I mean, I can count on one hand how many times I've been in it, how many times I've bought something from a dispensary, and I've worked for them for years prior to recently. So it just gets you to thinking how many people are really out there. But the difference is the older folks are coming in more into it and the younger folks are getting into it sooner. So there's definitely a market replacing those people that have left for personal reasons or are doing it themselves. But the High Times Cannabis Cup was, I think, the last vector of that kind of cannabis freedom in Michigan. I hate to say it. I mean, I had a blast. Don't get me wrong. We did really well. We won quite a few things, and we were happy about that. But truthfully, I don't think we'll ever see something like that again. And I lived out in Colorado for years, and I went to those. And I mean, the biggest High Times Cup that I went to out there maybe had 10,000 people. I want to say the one in Flint had 30,000 or something like that. So I think that there's too much. I think it's too much for the community. People don't want the advertising. People don't want everyone showing up and, into their town and everything all the time. So it's tough because if it makes dollars, it makes sense, but it's also difficult to create that type of environment again now that the restrictions have been placed on people that have been placed, if that makes any sense.
Well, I'm hoping that we do kind of get back to that. I think some of that was the unfortunate pandemic situation that put a big squash to that. I think we were, full tilt to that point, and then that kind of like just pulled the rug out from underneath us. But I think we'll be back to that. I think that process right there, built a real strong cannabis community. And I think even more so, I think that people are starting to realize if they want to get back to that more connoisseur cannabis, they have to go to these events to get it, to be honest with it.
Yeah.
So I think hopefully that'll keep fueling things.
Well, I can't argue with that because it seems to be that's what's happening. It seems to me like people who know go to events and people who don't go to shops. And I'm not trying to belittle anyone or say anything negative about anyone, but that's just been my experience. Like at the shops, you see people come in and buy smaller amounts and they buy them more frequently. And then at these events, you see people come in and they donate in larger amounts because I think they just know. And it's kind of crazy to think that there's that much of a dichotomy in the market. But boy, I'll tell you, I can't really think of any other explanation.
No, I think that they just understand that's where it's at. And I think they just like the more farmers market appeal with it, being able to one-on-one a little bit more with the grower, the caregiver, you know, who doesn't like that? You know what I mean? That's when I buy seeds, that's where I like to buy my seeds. I can
Yep.
buy anything online, but I prefer to at an event, be able to talk to the breeder or whatever one on one, see what they're excited with. And again, you can talk to somebody, but when it's that one on one and you can see the sparkle in their eye, you know what I mean? Their face
Yep.
tighten up real good with that smile. You go, there might be something there. You might
Yep.
just like put back that pack you had in mind and go, well, that
Yep.
might be it right there.
Yep, I 100% agree. I mean, it's the selling eggs on the side of the road type idea, right? There's just some authenticity to it.
Right on. And you've been actually putting together a couple of some events like that, correct?
Yeah, it's been kind of a new adventure for me. So far, it's been really really good, really positive. I did not realize quite how much work it is to be involved in that, And I'm on an ancillary kind of position, right? But I still I can tell you it's really unbelievable to see how different expectations can be between people. So we have people that show up to an event, like let's just say like the High Times Cannabis Cup, that don't know anything about cannabis. And now all of a sudden they're literally swimming through clouds of cannabis, right? And then you have people who show up and they're there for 10 minutes, they buy exactly what they want, and then they leave. And then you have the other 90% of people who are just kind of there for the experience, right? And once they have that experience, I don't think they're turned off, right? I think they're kind of brought into the community, actually, is what I would say. It's almost more like a positive hazing type ceremony. Like you got to go to your first show to understand like what this is really about. And then the other part that I like about it is you can employ people that are your friends, people you might know that are performers and stuff like that. There's a more personal aspect to it. But the truth of the matter is people just, they want a story. Just like you said, they don't want to buy something online. They want a story. And if you can present yourself in a way and you answer questions intelligently and you give a decent product, at least you're already ahead of the game. It's like I tell these commercial places, like, if you guys want to grow the most, that's fine. But if you want to grow the best, you need to, you need to really invest in that. And when they do that, they see exactly what I mean by this. Like they can have a better story, right? These commercial pros, they want to hire people and then kind of take their story. But the reality is it's almost always an older guy and his son, or an older guy and his daughter, or an older woman and their children, or their grandchildren, or their son-in-law, or their daughter-in-law. So to have the ability to point to like dirty hands. I don't necessarily mean dirty hands, but to be able to have some calluses on your hand, shake your hands with the farmer, and to be able to do those type of things, it's just much more personal. And you can't do that with an event that has 75 vendors, right? It's just not the way it works. So it's quickly becoming more about the entertainment, and the cannabis is kind of more the side thing, where people want to just come and have a social experience and then just have cannabis be a part of that. It's interesting to see, though. I believe there's a lot of laws that are, governing keeping cannabis and alcohol separate, which, I have no problem with. But it's just interesting that they don't want you consuming outdoors unless you're out of visible sight from people, but you can basically drink anywhere, right? Like you can drink on the Riverwalk, you can drink on these types of things. So I'd like to see a consistency be applied to both places, but unfortunately at this time, I don't think we're seeing that.
So if somebody were wanting to get in touch to you about putting on an event or getting, being a part of one that you're having, how could they do so?
So that's real easy. You can feel free to call me. Oh gosh, I'm starting to show my age here. You can feel free to message me on at maizeandgrew, or I'm a part of a partnership stands for the acronym is C3Q Michigan. So that stands for Cannabis, Community, Culture, and Quality. So you can find us on there, and we've managed to have this kind of beautiful, like, private little club that's garnered a little bit of attention. So we're happy about that. But the easiest way to do that is just contact me through either one of those, because I hate to admit it, I don't have a secretary, so I just allow the text messages to kind of be my filing system. So I use that as kind of my way of understanding who I need to who I need to interact with first. So I promise you, I'm not ignoring you. I do a lot of driving, so I'm on the road a lot. So it's not easy for me to do the social interaction unless I'm sitting down. But I promise you, when I sit down, I try and get everybody done at once. And the demand to be vendor, or demand to be spotlighted caregiver or something like that, is certainly there. And I'm starting to see that people are happier to be a part of something smaller and private than they are to be a part of something larger and let's say less warm. We're small, warm type of thing, and the larger types they tend to be a little bit colder. It's a little bit more competitive, I guess would be the word. Whereas we're trying to be more cooperative. I'd rather have, it's just like when I consult with people for their grows. How many people do we need for this? Well, we need 8 people who know what they're doing, or we need 12 people who are willing to learn, right? I'd rather work with the 8 people who know what they're doing than try and, as silly as it is for a teacher to say to you, I don't want to teach. It's the same principle applied to these events. So that's always kind of been what my experience has been. And it's nice to be a part of the community too, to be invited to things, to be included.
I definitely think you're onto something there about the smaller event type thing. That's another thing that I think we took away from the pandemic type last few years is, we can't necessarily rely on a more of a large scale money operation system. We need to take care of things more locally. You know what I mean? Keep funds at home. And I think that's where people have woke up through that. They seen high times come through here. It towards the end, it wasn't even, once a year. It was 2, 3, 4 times. You know what I mean? And they see they rape, they come in here, they rape our caregivers, our vendors for spots, and then they take all that money right out of state. And I think a lot of people got hip to that and decided that, we'd rather buy local, sell local, support each other than, go to some of these larger events. And plus, like you said, that it's more the feel of being able to talk and, it's a better thing all around, I think. I prefer them myself.
Yes, I can't think of a better way to do it. I really can't. Other than everybody do it themselves, of course. But the most important thing I can say about the intimacy that's offered by smaller events or smaller venues is that I think it allows people who would otherwise be uncomfortable a chance to be comfortable, right? I've had this experience said to me on multiple occasions. I've had people say, Doug, I went to this huge 50+ vendor event and I didn't find one thing that I wanted. I didn't find one thing that I thought was worthwhile. And then I've had people come and say, Doug, it took me 2 minutes to find everything that I needed at this smaller event. And I think there's a mentality, right? Like there's people that don't like to shop at Meijer because it's too big of a store, right? That doesn't compute with me, but that's why Walgreens does well or Dollar Tree does well. And I think in that sense, we're offering people a more comfortable environment. And the intimacy that comes with that I don't think you can replace that.
So when is the next event. I know we just missed one there. You just had one uh, this week. I wish I would have known prior. I would have helped, throw that out for everybody because I prefer to support, all of our local folks as well. So when is the next one that they may be able to keep their eye open for?
So I'm thinking probably, I'd like to do them every 6 to 8 weeks if possible. But we'll see. It's really, it's funny you'd say that you wish you had known earlier, because it's not your fault that you didn't. It's actually, it's difficult to get ads out. Even in print, I did a print ad, and that was pretty easy. I'll admit that guy was pretty good. It was from a paper called the Rolling Paper. The guy's super nice. I think his name was Chris. Really nice guy. He took really good care of us, but everything else was really difficult. Like, we got rejected on a lot of things for, formatting and like little incidental things. And then at the very end, right before the event was supposed to happen, they released the ad. So there's a little bit of difficulty there. Finding the venue is also really difficult. You either find people who are willing to just give it to you, or people who want, $5,000 for it. So it's hard to find that middle ground. But I think we have most of those problems figured out. And I'd say at the maximum, I'd like to have another one in no more than 2 months.
That's awesome. I myself, I appreciate the work because I know how much of a hassle that shit can be. And again, I don't think, like you said, people realize how much work it is to put on an event like that. And again, I appreciate the fact that you're giving the caregivers and other vendors, a shot to stay alive, if you will,
Right.
throughout this rough time.
Right, man. And that's our whole thing, man. We don't charge, we don't charge nothing. Well, we really, it's very inexpensive to work with us, because that's like, we're not trying to make our money on the booths. We're just trying to have something. We're just trying to have something that we're just all trying to eat, man. And that's where that authenticity comes from. People, I can't tell you how kind people were. I can't tell you how amenable people were, how considerate people were. It's just a collective mentality. And I think if you focus on quality, you really can't fail. The only thing that could do you any wrong is bad weather at that point.
That one of the favorite things about the events I like is it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
You know, people get to enjoy quality cannabis and that, but moreover, as the people that produce the cannabis, as they talk to these people, as we're, the one-on-ones we're referring to, it gives us more fuel for why we do what we do. You know what I mean? Hearing the stories and how it affects people and all that, that just gives us the more drive to head back into the garden to produce all the more quality cannabis. So it's a reoccurring recharging of the batteries for the caregivers as well. I think. Anyway.
Right, and that's exactly right. And at this point, if you've survived, you might have survived, which is good. But it's the whole purpose is so that people don't have to basically piss away their investment. I put way too much money into my grow. I'd sooner live at my grow than give it up, because there's so much equipment in there. It's expensive. And to expect people to be able to drop on a dime and just change their life like that, it's just unreasonable. That's what drove me to Lansing, was that these guys are making those decisions not knowing that their yes or no vote will literally change someone's occupational status, right? And that's it's that important. The other thing I will say, though, is I don't understand why we can't have both, right? I don't understand why there can't be good commercial and good smaller venues, but there's just this competing directive. There's this competitive, it's almost like a diaspora, right? Like there's only a few of us left in this area, and we're competing to raise what was originally what supported all this. And now the people who are just coming in are offering this watered down, cheap and commercial version of the same thing. And then they're trying to step on your throat too. So it's the thing that makes all this work is cooperation. And I think that the people that are able to still cooperate are willing to, but the people who are, you know, they got to feed their kids, or they got to, you know, put gas in their car, they just don't have the option anymore to be a part of that. And I mean, really, that's the saddest thing of the whole thing, is taking out the OGs, you know, taking out the people who have been doing this. And hell, man, I didn't start doing this till it was legal. I mean, of course I wasn't, you know, I also wasn't old enough to really know when cannabis was truly illegal. Because I mean, even when I got into high school, I think Colorado and Hawaii were still medically legal. So it was, you know, it was still part of the conversation. So for people not to understand that there's enough room for everybody, it just blows my mind. You know, it's become this tit for tat thing, and now we have a dichotomy, right? When we should have had a much larger sea of people to pick from it. And sure, I understand, like, you're on your way up north, you can't call your caregiver to get you a joint, but you certainly could have called them the week before to deliver you exactly what you wanted, exactly what you expected, at exactly the price you agreed on. And you just, if we're making apples to oranges comparisons, you know, I'm seeing now that they're allowing dispensaries to deliver. And I would be interested to see how many people actually utilize that service. Because I bet you it's a lot. And that's, you know, that was really a leg cut out from the caregiver, right? I know I have patients, or I've had patients. Unfortunately, I've had some that have, you know, passed, and others that have just gone recreational, that literally just don't want to be seen in the dispensary. And that blew my mind when that guy told me that. I knew a guy who was an engineer for Ford. He was one of my patients for years. Really good guy, super smart guy. But he was like, Doug, I just can't risk being seen at the dispensary. And I kind of really changed my mind about what use a dispensary could be, right? And if we're all able to do all the same things, you know, deliver and have multiple patients, you know, the only difference is going to be customer service and the product, of course. But I struggle to see how there's not enough for everybody, and it breaks my heart to see, you know, even good businesses compete, you know, on the commercial scale. You know, I think of places like Bloom City Club or you know, what is it called? Ann Arbor Wellness. Like, you know, people that I've known from when I got my start, really good people that are shit. I mean, one of them got robbed recently. The other one, you know, they're hacking prices on each other, you know, and then there's this outside group that's just lowballing the entire market. And it's just heartbreaking. It really is, because there's just enough room for everyone. There really is. But I think the elephant in the room wants the rest of the room. And that just doesn't fly well with me.
I think it's funny about the guy that doesn't want, or the, you know, whoever doesn't want to be seen in the dispensary. I think that's it's kind of funny in my opinion. You know what I mean? For one, I think anybody that would be in the dispensary is like right in that alley. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To where they'd
Yeah,
be
on your
like,
side.
I knew he was cool. You know what
Yeah,
I
right,
mean? And I
right.
don't think they would be that dick at work that was like, I seen him at the dispensary. Da, 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 da. You know what I mean? So I don't think you're gonna run into the asshole that you're in fear of at work. So I think you're more apt to run into your own kind there. So I think that's kind of funny, that aspect of it. But
Oh, he always made me laugh. He was just, I mean, it was before he smoked, he was always paranoid. It always made you wonder what he was like afterwards.
yeah, that would be I've said that about the show too. The same thing. People, well, you're only gonna run into the only people that you know, like the like minds in the chat. So I think you're good. I don't
Like,
think this is gonna land on the wrong desk, to be honest.
it's like my grandma always says, you know, birds of a feather flock together, right?
In fact, that's the way I've always seen it. I've actually seen a lot of people that are, in dispensaries. I've been on that side of things and went, yeah, I'd like you a little bit more now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's no different, right? Like there's people that, that are sommeliers, right? People who really know wine, right? And they want to express their knowledge of wine, right? I feel like I'm like that with cannabis. Like I just want to express my knowledge with cannabis. But it's funny because I'll sit down to anybody and I'll tell you, hey, I'm Doug. I work in the cannabis industry. This is what I do. Like, without even thinking about it. And I've had people, look at me funny. And I think to myself, like, what is it going to take for that to just be a normal thing? But I will say, conversely, on the flip side, it does often turn into, hey, let me take you out to lunch tomorrow. So, being in the cannabis industry does have a few other outside perks.
Go hand in hand anyway. So, yeah, good thing. Nothing wrong with a good meal after some cannabis, that's for sure.
Right, exactly. Well, it's funny you mentioned that because when I was out in Colorado, they started doing those 3, 4, 5 course meals that were cannabis infused. And gosh, I just can't remember the name of the place, but I used to work with a guy. His name was Tommy. He was a really good guy. I liked him. And Tommy used to go to this place called, it was called Wild or like Into the Wild, or no, that's a book. Something wild. But basically the idea is you could only purchase game that you could kill and eat in Colorado, right? So it's like extremely local in that way. And they started doing these 3, 4, 5 course cannabis meals, and I mean, it was a hit. And there was a place that used to be in, maybe not the best part of town. I used to live in Capitol Hill, and Capitol Hill was known to have some problems. And there was a place right down the road from me. I used to live on Pearl and Colfax. That place was on, I think, like Colfax and was it Mallory or something like that. It was right down the road. And that was a bed and breakfast. And it was at that time, it was the only bed and breakfast that allowed you to consume cannabis on site. And it was right next to the dispensary and the grow that I worked for. And this place was booked out for 3 years ahead of time because they were the only place where you could really do that. And then people kind of started getting a little bit more loose, and they would, smoke on their porch or smoke out in the park or whatever. And I always found, and I will say this for Colorado, there's a couple of things I didn't like about Colorado. I hated not having any water. I hated not having a mire. But man, they sure had a few things right. Their people were fit. They were almost all in shape. And everybody made an effort to be good with cannabis around like children or people that weren't involved in the community. So like people weren't puffing, big giant smoke clouds in people's faces as they walk by. There was an etiquette to it. There was a park. It was called Cheeseman Park. And then there was another park called Washington Park. And that's where you could just go. And I mean, you had your little space and the cops didn't mess with you as long as you didn't have kids around or you weren't, being a nuisance. They really allowed for that vibe. And it was interesting to, on one side of the street, see only the bed and breakfast allow that type of lifestyle, and then to go down the road and see, it's back to, the merry pranksters type of thing where people are quite overt with things. And it was an interesting dichotomy to see because somehow Colorado at that time didn't allow commercial interest to override the lifestyle. And I'd say Boulder was like that too, but Boulder was, I don't use this word too often, but Boulder was super heady. They were just a very heady town, and they really did a lot to protect their local caregivers and their local businesses. So I have to say I was pretty impressed with that.
Where has been your favorite cannabis location so far? It seems like you've been around a little bit in your cannabis journey. What's been one of your favorite spots so far?
So as a consumer, man, I gotta say, I think the best dispensary I've ever been in, and I've been, I've worked, I when I say been in, like been in and like been there, not as a tour, like went there personally. I think honestly, man, it was Colorado Alternative Medicine. That's where I used to live. That's where I used to work, and I used to live by there in Colorado. And then in Michigan, I I got to admit, High Level Health is doing a great job. I used to work for them too, so I say that with a little bit of pride. And honestly, man, I think Bloom City Club has the best dispensary I've ever been in. I think that's the woman-owned dispensary in Ann Arbor. And I think they do it absolutely right. Their ambiance, their people, their products. I was very, very, very impressed by them. I've worked with them for years back in the day when it was easier to do that, and I was always very, very impressed with them.
So I see new flavors here as well. Are you venturing into the breeding side of cannabis?
So it's funny you'd say that because I'm thinking about it. Luckily, I've had some good relationships with some really solid breeders. Third Coast, I've been running I went to Gene Traders a couple of Gene Traders ago, and I just kind of spent a bunch of money, and I got some good stuff. I want to say I got some Scapegoat, I got some Third Coast, I got who is it? The ones that do like Rainbow Kush mints and like breath stank and stuff like that. And I was always one who was like, that stuff's all garbage, blah 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 blah. But I would tell you that I've been running the same strains that I've had for close to a decade, and they're getting tired. They're just not putting out what they used to, and it's time for some new stuff. And I've really focused on cultivating a nice seed and pheno hunt kind of portion of my life right now, because I would like to get into breeding, because if I have to move again, which it's looking like I might for this new consultation job that I'm doing, I would really like to keep my old facility just for breeding, but I'm going to have to hire like some good person, like a med grower or a Third Coast or a Scapegoat. I'm going to have to hire somebody like that to come teach me some stuff, because I'll admit that I don't even think I'm a pollen chucker at this point. I don't think I have much of those skills, but I am always accepting new seeds and clones. And because of that and my personal purchases, I've actually been able to restock a lot of new flavors. A couple of the latest big hits have been strawberry candy, nose candy, sweet pink pie has kind of made a comeback. That was one of my original ones. Detroit cookies was another one. I wasn't thrilled with the output on that, but the quality was really high. I'm trying to think. I got a whole bunch from Scapegoat. I bought I think the most expensive pack of seeds at the Gene Trader I went to. It was a Blissful Wizard number 60, and I'm getting ready to pop those now. And I think I'm really excited to see what comes of that. A lot of hashers, a lot of Death Star crosses. I was for a while there. I was really trying to work in the rosin market, and that was kind of the big name of the game there. But other than that, that's all I can think of off the top of my head. But I got a good Gorilla Butter from one of my buddies, and I normally laugh at that kind of stuff, but I got to admit that was a good one. And unfortunately, I have to say goodbye to my very, very good Grease Monkey. It's just it's time. So I'm looking to replace that with some of those heady Death Star type hasher type of plants. So that'll be kind of the new thing, but it's going to be a year before I really have any of those figured out, because I just started planting the seeds not too long ago. But this time next year, I should have a full stock, and then from there, I'd like to breed out maybe some of the better ones. But again, it's not the biggest priority for me, but it's definitely the next thing I'd like to get into. I'm also interested in tissue culture.
That's something I think's going to be huge. I'm hoping anyway. Mainly for breeding purposes. I think it will help clear up a lot of the muck. Basically, there's just so much stuff out there, and so many BXs, and so many breeders putting forth their version, but not necessarily saying it's their version of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm hoping that tissue culture will eliminate a lot of that shit, because they'll know they won't have to. You know what I mean? They'll always be able to go back to the breeder and get that that stock.
Yep.
So I think hopefully that'll eliminate a lot of the bullshit.
Well, and from what I understand, it's like, it's not, I'm not trying to belittle this, but it's not terribly complicated from what I understand. Like, I understand the biology and the physiology and the makeup of that might not be easy to explain, but as I understand, the processes are actually pretty easy. So, I mean, I got a buddy who just graduated a couple of years ago with a biology degree, and he got into that. And I want to say he's got to be making 6 figures. I mean, just rehabilitating people's strains. And I mean, I love the guy, but he's not the most passionate person I've ever met. And he's really just doing an excellent job. I think he's even teaching classes now with it. So I'd be interested to get into that too, because I think if you're a grower without that capability, I mean, that's like being a grower who can't clone or something like that. It just doesn't seem to make much sense.
Yeah, there's just so many pluses to the tissue culture. I really hope it becomes more affordable, and I hope more breeders look into holding their stock like that.
Yeah. It makes all the sense in the world. It's the healthiest plant. It takes up the least amount of space.
So, what have been some of your favorites to cultivate so far? As far as you personally, what have been some of your favorites?
Oh yeah. So I'm a guy, I'm a old soul at heart. So of course the first thing I'm going to tell you about was one of my first strains that I ever grew. It was actually the first seed I ever popped. It was a Star Killer. It's by Rare Dankness, one of my favorite breeders. Excellent, super nice guy too. His name is Scott. He'll talk to you all day. He'll give you his phone number. He'll send you every email and everything that you could possibly think of. He takes care of people. So I always go back to that. I had a really great Durban poison that was just fantastic. I really, really enjoyed that. That was one of my favorite strains. Unfortunately, I've had to phase that out because it's old. It's just so old at this point. But other than that, some of these new ones that I'm liking, the nose candy is really good. I really like that one. I also am liking the strawberry candy. The Detroit cookies was good. I just would have liked to have seen a little more production out of that. But cultivation wise, I am really starting to see a lot more quality strains coming out that I really, I don't tend to make a catalog, right? I'll buy 100 seeds of one thing and I'll just run it. But there's a lot now where I'm finding myself saving packs, for down the road versus like, hey, let's just see what we get. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that there's so much fire and so much heat coming out right now that you get it and you want to hold on to it. I hate to say that as a grower, but it's true.
I move through things so quickly. It's funny how you have so much weight with one thing until that next thing comes through, and then you're like, man, what was that? What was that? Why did?
That's summer lovin', I think, is how they described it in that movie.
Right out.
Yeah. But what about you? What are some experiences that you've had recently? Is there anything that sticks out in your mind that you've seen in the community that's really positive or really negative?
Yeah. Well, as far as positive things, I think more and more people are starting to have an interest in growing, which I think is huge. I think more and more people are starting to pick up on that lag that you're speaking of. I think they're more wanting to get more involved with cannabis politics, because I think we all kind of fear what could be happening here real quickly with recreational cannabis. And I think that's the home grow will be swept under the rug. So I think more and more people are kind of waking up to needing to be there I like the fact that you did point out that, you know, we should take a little bit more time and speak a little bit more legibly when we get to that microphone. Uh, will help immensely our cause. So I'm glad the fact you brought light of that. So as far as negative things, I don't like to necessarily make light of the negative. You know what I mean? It has a tendency on its own to just spread like a wildfire. You know, putting any light to anything bad is just, you know, adding fuel to it. But there is a lot of good things going on in the cannabis community. I see, you know, more and more things being done with cannabis as far as like edibles uses, tincture uses and stuff like that. Uh, more people that we were talking about earlier, more people that were afraid of cannabis before. I've seen a lot more people wake up to cannabis, even in my own family, who were very, uh, very not open to cannabis at all. And I don't know what honestly opened the door to it, because they're very religious, that side of the family, and now all of a sudden they seem to be more open to topicals and stuff like that. I don't know if I honestly think it's the age, to be honest with you, because back in like the younger days when they had more fight in them, they were definitely like fuck cannabis, you know. Yeah, and that was sadly a lot of the reasons why I didn't see a lot of them, because their attitude towards cannabis really, we just clashed there. But since they've gotten older, I think they just realized it's a more affordable option and it's more beneficial. They see, you know, more of an impact from the cannabis creams than the shit they buy or prescribe from their doctors. So that's, you know, it's nice. That's really positive. I love seeing people waking up to cannabis, all ages, all forms of, you know, walks of life. I love hearing them stories. So that's one of my favorite things, and the positive things I see about cannabis is slowly but surely people are waking up. I just think, like you pointed out, we need to have more of a hand in guiding it through the rest of the way. Otherwise, we might just get screwed in the end. Sadly.
Yes, I agree. That's unfortunate, but it's true. You know, the other thing I'm seeing is a lot of, like you said, a lot of spin-off businesses. You know, merchandise, even packaging. I mean, that's, gosh, I can only imagine how many packaging companies have erupted just because of the need for packaging in cannabis. So I mean, I like to see that community grow, and I like to see people have different avenues to be a part of this, but also, you know, be hands off, so to speak. So it's been interesting. I wonder if we're going to be able to I wonder if we're going to be able to turn the corner collectively as a country, or if it's still going to be, you know, state by state, you know, one at a time. I'm hoping that some sort of federal bill comes through, but I don't know. They've been saying that for like 5 years, so I don't know how much we can rely on that.
Are you there?
Oh, yep, I'm here. Go ahead. I'm sorry, it just came through.
Yeah, I've been rambling for about 2 minutes now with my mic off, muted.
Oh, that's all right. I do it
I
all the
just
time.
happened to look up. I just happened to look up, seeing that red line through the mic, and go, oh shit.
I do it quite frequently. I wonder if there's there maybe that's the next invention. We can figure out a way to for it to do it automatically, and we could be millionaires and start our own grow.
Oh, now I'm totally squirreled because of my mute. Oh man.
That's all right. Oh, so I'm looking at these seeds I got here. It's raw genetics waffles. I remember getting these from a young man. He couldn't have been more than 20, 21. He was very nice. So Scapegoat Mega, which is Death Star crossed with Death Star crossed with Mainline OG. That one I'm going to look forward to. Moods, that's Hell's OG crossed with Death Star crossed with OG. So there's some heavy hashers. I got some stuff from my buddy out in Hawaii. It's called Tropical Aurora and Ignite. I can't remember which one is which, but I did grow the Tropical Aurora recently, and it was very, very fruity. I really liked it. So I'll be trying to get that going here in a little bit. But I'll tell you, it's them tropical strains, man. They sure don't produce much.
No, and I think they involve a little bit more of a cure time to be everything they could be. And that's hard for me to say because I'm not on the cure side of the fence. That's a whole nother subject for me. I think cannabis. I think when you talk about the cure, I think you're trying to just turn it into something that it's not. You know what I mean?
Right.
We,
Right.
I think when it's more fresh, there's that just after being able to harvest it, jar it, maybe even jar it for a few weeks, you were more able to individualize the terps, the flavors. You can sit back with that joint and hit it and go, ooh, yeah, I can taste a little, you know what I mean? And then hit it again and go, yeah, I pick up a little, but I think a cured cannabis, you just kind of, yeah, fruit punch.
Yep. Yep.
You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely I see that play out quite a bit.
So, are you a flower guy? I heard you mention that at one point. It sounded like you dabbed a little bit, but I also heard you mention flower. Which do you prefer these days?
Oh boy, I'll tell you, I don't get into the dabs too much. I have a weird experience with them. They either work, but they don't work as I expect, or they just don't seem to work. I don't know. It's they just don't work for me. But I as silly as it sounds, like I tell people all the time, like I really don't smoke that much because we smoke higher quality flower, and I like just a bubbler or a bong or even just a plain old pipe, and it kind of makes people laugh. They're like, "Oh, you don't want this Puffco Peak and all this like advanced silly stuff," and I'm just like, "Nope." I just take a regular old pipe, and I think that's kind of getting to your point where you're able to kind of have a better experience, have a more textured, a more layered experience. So I actually had a buddy who got me into that. He's like, "Yeah, man, I don't use nothing but a pipe," and I kind of got to thinking about it, and I'd say more often than not. So it it just kind of fits perfectly. The bubbler is my favorite, like just a little handheld sidecar bubbler or a nice straight tube water pipe, I guess is what we were supposed to call them. But yeah, that's been kind of my method is just this flower, and if I'm feeling a little crazy, I'll add some keef to it. But it's funny, man, you can't even give keef away anymore. I used to collect it, and I make pucks out of it, save it. I sometimes when I was short on a patient or something, I'd give them one of those and stuff. And now people don't even want it. So I think that transition over to the dab side has really taken over. But hey, man, to each their own. I'm not against it. I just it's just too much. I'd rather just light a bowl and go. But I do have an email, so actually I have two of them. One's for shows and one's for personal use. But I'd say I use it like maybe 4 or 5 times a year. I'm really funny like that. I'll do joints for like the first 3 months of the year, and then I'll do a bowl for the next 3 months, and then I'll do a water pipe for the next 3 months, and then I'll do a combination of the four. It's kind of, I guess it's seasonal.
Right. I can appreciate that. I go through my little phases as well. Uh, when I make my hash, so I can tell you what, it doesn't matter how I'm smoking it, it's got hash and everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hash rules everything around me.
So, I heard you mention at one point you were on the rosin uh, rails there. You were riding that wave as well. How do you feel about that as a rosin as a medicine? Uh, I, it breaks my heart that I watch some of these rosin artists. There we go. Press
Yeah,
some of this hash, the bubble hash. I say a lot of times that I think that that whole process was kind of put forth by some of these pressing companies just to show you these rivers of rosin. I just think, again, kind of just relating back to the medicine mindset. I just believe there's too much lost in the processes there. When as soon as you throw it in the water, you're losing terps, you're losing oil, you're losing and then throughout the whole process, you're losing. And then you're gained with you're left with some medicine there. What is it? The medicine. You know what I mean? I think we're kind of taking it directionally at that point. That's my
yeah,
opinion. How do you feel about it?
yeah. There's definitely a surgical precision to what you lose there. I definitely can agree with that. And there certainly is a video or a audit, a visual stimulation from seeing rivers of rosin or whatever. But I what I like about it is it's getting kind of farther away from hydrocarbons, so that's always a better thing for me. But I really found that rosin, gosh, I don't want to say it like this, but it just kind of got old on me. I mean, I tried it for about a week, and I had a really good guy do it for me too, like one of the best guys I know, and it certainly worked. But it's it's too difficult to dose correctly. That's always been my experience. That's why I don't really mess with edibles either, because they're just difference between an edible on Tuesday and Wednesday, or empty stomach or a full stomach, or hydrated or not. It just ends up being too unpredictable.
Yeah, again, man, I don't know. For me, I'm about saving money. And when I think about squish and take how much cannabis it takes to reduce down to that, I appreciate the connoisseur effect of it all. But man, I think all about all the lost joints there. The lost joints or bowls that can take you so much further than that little rosin dab.
Right. It does seem to have a bit of showmanship to it, right? It might be more visually appealing, but yeah, I'll tell you, you can't, I look at a bag of weed that I create, or that I get or whatever, and I do think like you in this sense, like, all right, there's a couple good joints in there, so I can appreciate what you're saying there. But there's it's pretty in the jar. It looks nice. It smells good. But yeah, you're right. It's extremely laborsome, and you're gosh, you're lucky to get what 5-7% return on that type of stuff, and even that's pretty good. So I bless the people who are willing to do that and do all that work for it. But for me, yeah, just try it and cure it right, and just throw it in a bowl or a joint. But I tell you, I work for some of these guys. They've been doing this for 30-40 years. They can't even roll a joint. These guys just have these little Puffco peaks and stuff. So it's funny. I think it has it has its audience. But from what I understand, the rosin market is just absolutely dropped recently. So it's gets back to that comment you made about $3 dabs in Oklahoma, I'm not surprised at all, you know, and I can see that happening, you know, pretty quickly here if it hasn't already, you know, even including rosin. So from what I understand, that's already kind of starting to happen.
Feel like in some ways the larger scale markets, the outdoor grows that we talked about earlier, have kind of destroyed the extract market and hash. And in some ways, I think at some point, like the color of the hash, all
Yeah.
kind of stemmed from all these guys out, like say Cali, that had large harvests and that they couldn't deal with. That they were all like, "Oh, if we pull it early and
Yeah.
throw it in the freezer," you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys love this fucking clear beach sand, don't you? It's super heady. Yeah, it's because it was a cost-effective, deal for them.
Yeah.
And I think that dictated the hash market for a long time. And I don't know. I don't think it's accurate, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's
moreover, I think it forced a whole generation into dabs. I think a lot of the people just kind of coming into cannabis uh, don't appreciate flower as much because they've been used to dabs, 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 dabs. You know what I mean? That's their first choice. They don't want to deal with the dirty flower. They want the dab.
Yeah, and it's gotten to the point now where people want to customize their dabs even, you know, they want a flavor profile of one and then a cannabis or a cannabinoid effect of another. And I mean, it's become you know, the essential suicide drink, you know, when you're a kid and you'd put a little bit of every drink in the from the Coke fountain or whatever in your drink. That's kind of where I see that going. It's novel, I guess is the word.
So I guess let's go back a little bit here. Tell us a little bit about your first grow. What initially kind of kicked off the whole momentum for you wanting to grow, and what did you grow? Let's start. Let's kind of go back a little bit to that phase in your journey.
Let me paint you a picture. It's 2006. It's Kalamazoo, Michigan. I'm living in a house with six other guys. I started smoking cannabis because I had a roommate who happened to be the cannabis guy for our dorm. I mean, this was back when a $5 joint got you high all weekend kind of thing. So I decided, oh man, I don't need to be paying for this. I'm going to start growing this myself. So, and this, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I'm gonna tell it because I think it's important for people to know. My first grow, dude, I was so dumb. I was so dumb. I used an aquarium light, like a tote that you would carry around, you know, clothes or something in, you know, a plastic tub. And I didn't even have tools enough to drill holes in the tub. I had to use a lighter to burn holes in the tub. I put in all the seeds that I possibly could. I mean, I probably covered that entire top of the tub with seeds. And I will tell you though, a lot of them did sprout, but I don't know if I had finals or I was just distracted or something, and they all ended up dying because they either they grew into the light or the light singed them or whatever it was. So I ended up having to throw that entire batch out. So I took it behind the dumpster. You know, when you're freshman or sophomore in college, you live in communal housing, and you know, I just decided I'd throw this out back behind the dumpster. Well, I missed, and I had to go back and throw it back out. But the following summer, you know, we had a whole bunch of little plants growing because I mean, I'm not lying to you. There had to have been 1,000 seeds in that tote. You know, we just collected from everybody I knew from our swag weed. And I ended up having to, you know, say goodbye to all those. But the ones that came through the next year, the volunteer plants, a couple of them made it almost to maturity, but I'm pretty sure a rabbit got them. And then it wasn't but maybe a couple of months after that that my cousin called me and said, "Hey, I'm starting to grow. I need some help. You want to help me?" And then that's when I started growing basil, which attracted the ladies from the the church, who paid me for the basil, which made me think, oh, well, maybe I can get paid for growing other plants. So my first grow was in a closet in a 6-person house in a dorm or in Kalamazoo, Michigan in 2006. And I didn't pick up again trying to grow until almost 2010. So it was, I put about as much effort into it as a Google search. And I think I had even worse results personally on that first grow. But the next 3 grows I did were with my cousin, and there was a lot of success with those. And then after that, it was just off to the races. I went out to Colorado and learned commercially, came back to Michigan, did it personally. And then, that's how I got in front of you today.
Right on. So, how much do you think being a bud tender played into, like, say, the growing of cannabis? Were they side by side, or did one come first, one come after? Where did the bud tending kind of come into play?
So it's funny you'd say that, because I actually have had someone ask me this question before, and it was bud tending actually was ancillary. It was just the guy that hired me, that gave me my start in Detroit. He just needed a bud tender, so that's how I became a bud tender. But I was lucky enough to have a person that I worked with who was, very knowledgeable. And this was 10 years ago. The guy actually was in a really bad car accident. So he really had that therapeutic need for cannabis. And I would just hear him talk and talk and talk about cannabis like crazy. And knowing specific strains and all this stuff. And I kind of equate it to Pokemon, if you remember Pokemon. It's like kind of like a game where you have these creatures that battle each other or whatever, but each one has special skills and stuff. And I remember him just saying things that made me think, like, boy, this is kind of like a video game, kind of like Pokemon. And being able to take some of just that little bit of knowledge I got from him, and then being able to apply it into a garden in front of me made all the sense in the world. So I guess truthfully, bud tending came first. But cultivation was shortly thereafter, and I basically never really looked back, other than for the occasional extra few bucks on the weekend or whatever. But I love the interpersonal, the people. I'm a people person. Like, I really love that. But it really was so in high demand in Colorado that when you were a bud tender out there, you really were just a packager. I mean, there was lines out the door all the time. There really wasn't that personal experience that we might experience now. So yeah, I guess overall bud tending came first.
That's awesome. You mentioned another thing that I kind of relates back, I guess, to the conversation earlier. It's packaging, fucking packaging. Um, You know, I think that's one thing that as somebody that grows cannabis and whatnot, has a dream of, being the producer on a little bit larger scale. Um, I've always worried about that end of it all. You know what I mean? Even prior to cannabis, I've always been worried about the quality side of things, trying to keep my business small enough to where everything was touched by me. You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
had quality control over everything. And so as a grower, I've always been worried about the packaging side of things, turning things into the matrix and keeping my brand. You know what
yep,
I mean? You don't know how
yep.
long it's going to sit on shelves or be
Mm.
on a table before it's divided up, all that good shit. And then the end, it's got my picture and shit on it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I'm terrified of that. So I think, these smaller events that we talked about earlier are the perfect solution. You know what I mean? For quality control and, keeping things good for your brand, your garden, for the consumer. I think that's the answer, to be honest with you.
Yes, I agree. We had an experience like that at the High Times Cannabis Cup back when I was partner with a few other people, and we found that the only negative thing that happened that weekend was we used to run Durban Poison, and it was just so terpy that it really never diamonded out. Like, and the person that I had, that had doing this for me was a talented person. So I mean, I know it wasn't a failure of procedure, but it was just so terpy that you really couldn't even turn it on its side. It would leak out of the package. Well, I'll tell you that having that closeness to the packaging was super important, just like you described with your picture on it or your label or whatever it might be, because that person had, I want to say they probably bought 2 or 3 of those, or they donated for 2 or 3 of those. And I'd say they probably put them in a backpack or they put them in a bag and they spilled all over. And that person was able to like come right back to us. We traded them right out. And they even took the time to go and post that. And I know that sounds kind of silly, like it's kind of inconsequential, but it was really important to me because it allowed me to like feel like we were addressing everyone's issue. Like everyone left happy is really what I was trying to get at by that statement. Like to know that everybody is left happy and everybody has what they want. And if they don't, we can fix it. Like being that close to the product really made a huge difference because, it only takes one bad review, that's all it takes. So being able to accommodate the customer in that way. And it was just as simple as trading it out. It wasn't anything more complicated than that. But, you get home from a long day, you spend all this money on this really high quality cannabis, this really high quality extract, and, it's spilled out in your bag. Some people are looking for someone to blame when that happens. And for that person to take the time and explain to us what happened, and then for us to be able to just turn around and give it to her, I believe it was a her, without really any cost to us or loss to us, just being able to do that really made me feel attached to my product, really made me feel like we had some control over what was reaching our customers' experience, not necessarily just what was reaching their hands.
Yeah, I just hope that they at some point. I wouldn't even mind at some point. We've talked about this too. I'd be game for like a born on, a born on or an expiration date. To where they have to put their best cannabis forth, and then they maybe after that good on or best before date. That's when they take that shit back and fucking make extracts out of it. I
Yeah,
think that would be a perfect solution.
yeah, and it makes the most sense. I mean, you're paying for the processing, but either way, it's getting used. So I can agree with that. That's actually, it's I would imagine that's a pretty standard thing for some people. But I'll tell you, I've seen products that I know were growing last year on shelves still. So it's interesting because you either have caregivers that are behind and that are trying to get rid of old product, or you have super long testing lines for commercial products. So you're getting something that's 6 months old right off the bat, and whatever time it takes you to consume it, whatever time it takes you to find it and purchase it, it just it really adds up to it. And I think California tried to start canning their cannabis in plastic or tin cans or whatever, and they said that was supposed to help, but I haven't really experienced it, so I don't know. But it's an interesting solution, I suppose.
I'm not. Yeah, I think you're. Are you referring to like the nitrogen storage?
Yes.
I've heard that the nitrogen storage is almost kind of like the meat. It's good to a certain point, and then it
Yeah.
basically you can pull it out and like it dusts. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. That's about the
Yeah.
worst thing that can happen. Just pulverizes into dust. Oh man. Oh Lord.
How you doing, my friend? I understand it's been a long day.
Yep, I actually just was thinking I'm probably ready to get going here for the day. I really wanted to thank you for having me. I'd love to come back and do it again. Hopefully I'll have some more positive stories for you. I'm working on a couple of cases right now that have some potential to do some real positive things. So I'm hoping the next time we talk, I can have something positive to report.
Right on. Well, let me go over. I know pre-show I did a little bit, but this is officially how things go around here.
Okay.
Basically, there is the spotlighted show that we've done so far. Uh, so there's 3 shows on the channel at this point. There's the one me and you have done, the spotlight. And then there's the Weed Nerd World, which is only open to past guests, and which you are one now. So
Right.
that Zoom link that I sent you is always good for you, my friend. Anytime
Oh,
that you see a Weed Nerd World in the title, there's no more an invitation needed. You know, as long as you see that, it's open game. You can come hang out, smoke, tell us what you're up to, the events you're having, which is helpful to a lot of us caregivers here in Michigan if we were looking to vend or something like that, or we're just cannabis consumers that want to find an event in Michigan. Anytime you want to open our eyes to something like that, come hang out. Monday nights are a designated Weed Nerd World, kind of late, 2 a.m. But again, you can count. That's one night you can count on. You know what I'm saying? The rest of the
yeah.
night, the Weed Nerd Worlds are completely dictated by the guest. As I kind of hinted on, as we wrap this up, I'll kind of stretch my legs, fill my tray, and fill my coffee cup, and then
There you go.
I'll open the Weed Nerd World up again for the past guests till 4:20. So there's an option it could happen any day. You know what I mean? As a grower, I understand that we have some third shift tendencies. So if you happen to wake up one night and can't sleep or whatever, and you just want to smoke a joint real quick, feel free to come hang out, man. Smoke that joint. There's no dedication on time. You can just pop on, smoke that joint, say, hey, man, I'll be fucking whatever. You ain't even got to say nothing. You just come hang out and smoke a joint, whatever. Conversation can vary from cannabis to mushrooms to conspiracy to
Yeah, nice.
whatever. You know what I mean? It's a free for all in the Weed Nerd World. So whatever, just tune in and check it out. You're always welcome. Keep that in mind. You said you'd be willing to do a second. I'd be more willing to do a one-on-one, but I'm here to tell you, you're always welcome, my friend. The only other thing I'd like to get from you before you go is a silly thing I do called the soundbite. The soundbite will be at some point a commercial for your episode. Basically, in a nutshell, what I'm looking for, my version would be, hey, this is Eagle, and I'm on fucking Talking Shit with Eagle, episode 4. Fuck. 4 or no, I
646.
screwed up my own soundbite. Yeah, I screwed up my own soundbite. How about that? Episode 646. You can put whatever you want before or after that. I don't care as long as you've got that in the gist. I am super grateful and I am ready right now, my friend.
Hey guys, this is maizeandgrew. I'm just reporting live with Talking Shit with Eagle, and I wanted to make sure that everybody. Oh shit! I forgot what I was supposed to tell you, dude. I'm sorry. I totally forgot.
we're
was bad.
1 for 1 on the soundbite.
Shit, that's terrible. Well, that's all right. I'll tell you what. That's authentic. I like it.
Let's try again. Take
Okay,
2.
it's who I am, and then what else is it? Just a silly saying.
Basically, hello, this is Eagle, and I'm on fucking Talking Shit with Eagle, episode 4. Oh my god, I did it again. 646. Holy cow, I can't believe I fucked it up twice. But yeah,
So I say
something
your
like
name or
that.
my
At
name?
this point, your name,
Oh, gotcha,
my show, episode.
gotcha. I can do that. I'm ready.
Anytime you're ready, my
Oh, sorry. I was waiting for the recorder there. Hey guys, this is Maze and Grew. I'm on number 646 of Talking Shit with Eagle, and we got a lot of good stories we're going to cover today. We look forward to your attendance, and we're going to try and do another one with some even more new stories.
Perfect. Thank you so much, my friend, for hanging out with me tonight. Time is the most valuable thing we have, and you gave me a nice little chunk of yours. I have put the links to your Instagram and your Dankest Day Detroit tickets in chat, but is there anything else you'd like to throw out there for them? They can look for, my friend?
Oh, no, that should be plenty. Just look for the next event, and the next time I come back and talk with you, I'll have information about that.
Right on. Well, have a good night, my friend. Again, my deepest condolences about your family loss tonight. And thank you again for being a sport and hanging out tonight. I greatly appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for being understanding of my technical woes, but I think we did a good job, and I appreciate the comments about my grandma. That's very kind of you.
Thank you. You have a good night. And for the rest of you guys, hopefully I will see you in the weed nerd world here in a minute. If not, thank you guys for your time. Do not forget, random acts of kindness do save lives. Don't forget to help somebody out. I'll see you guys in a few.